Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace. This is another creator-owned spotlight, and today I have a creator who's returning to the show. It's been quite a while. He's been on a couple times before, but it's been a while. He is the writer and artist of an amazing WEBTOON series called Lavender Jack. It's my pleasure to welcome Dan Schkade back to the show. Dan, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. You're right. It's been too long.
Yeah, I think the last time we had you on, there were less than 5 episodes of season 2. You have finished
Yeah,
season 2 and you're now on to season 3, right?
that's right. We're over halfway done with season 3.
So I guess we should start out for any new listeners who haven't heard Dan on the show previously, not familiar with Lavender Jack. Let's do a little elevator pitch. Why don't you kind of explain what this Eisner nominated series is all about?
Well, certainly. Well, it is a mystery adventure series set in the early 1900s in kind of a slightly steampunkified alternate history. It takes place in the fictional European city of Gallery, where it's full of wealth and diversity and great social and scientific advancements, but it's also full of top to bottom corruption and absolute asymmetrical, the powerful just grinding the weak into dirt for their own ends. And into that milieu arrives Lavender Jack, this sort of purple Spring Hill Jackified vigilante who enters to sort of turn that power structure on its head. Of course, the people in charge of Gallery don't like that, so they hire this Teresa Ferrier, who's sort of the great detective of the previous generation, who's now kind of a somewhat over the hill, held in less well-regarded detective. And the series begins with her being hired to catch him. And the whole plot sort of, it tracks both his mission of, vigilantism, revenge, with her mission to uncover this winding secret that created him.
Yeah, one of the things I find so interesting about the series is, at least for myself, discovering it the first time and reading about Lavender Jack and reading about his alter ego, and immediately just feeling a connection to him. He's a very sympathetic character. He's somebody that's easy to root for. And you sort of feel like early on, at least I did, that he is so fully formed and is not perfect, because none of us are, but that he really doesn't he's not in need of personal growth. It seems like he's on the side of angels and making the right choices. But what's so interesting is throughout the course of, especially toward the end of season 1 and then throughout season 2, you realize or at least I did as a reader, you realize that's not the case. And even Lavender Jack himself realizes that, yeah, maybe these choices that he's made to even become Lavender Jack were maybe not the best. So my question is, was that purposeful? Did it happen organically as you were building the story and Mimly came to life for you, Lavender Jack came to life for you, or was it something that you set out to involve in the story?
Oh, it is definitely intentional from the beginning. I had worked in professional comics for a couple of years before I wrote Lavender Jack, and it had been several years in between Stan Hannibal, the last series I'd written, and Lavender Jack. And in those, in the years in between, I had really put a lot of study into writing. I realized that if I wanted to be good at this, I had to approach it like a craft that you learn, and not just as, I think there are some people who are employed as writers who don't take it as seriously as I would like them to. And one of the things I really latched onto is the idea that you can have aspirational protagonists, aspirational characters, people who are smarter, more charismatic, more put together than you. But those are still characters who need to change, or if nothing else, need to be put in situations that forces them to either change or to reaffirm their convictions. Like a popular example I like to use is, Tony Stark is a selfish guy who has to learn to be a good guy over the course of his arc, whereas Steve Rogers is a good guy who needs to figure out what being a good guy means in ever complexifying circumstances.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that Mimly is very much he's more in that Steve Rogers mold, where even when he's even when we look into his past and we see that he had some troubles, it's still like, it's not that he was a bad guy. It's that he was a young guy experiencing heartbreak, experiencing trauma. But again, not quite like a Bruce Wayne, for instance, where trauma defines him. It's more like a good guy figuring out how to get through trauma.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it relatable as well. So I hadn't read any of season 3 before I had reached out a little while ago, and we started talking about getting this together. And I was like, you know what? Not only do I want to read season 3, but it's been so long since I've read season 1 and 2. So I went back and I read.
Oh, wow.
All I think if you add them all together, it's like 109, 110 episodes. So yeah, I spent some time. We had some family stuff going on the last few weeks where I would be somewhere else just with my iPad and like, let me grab an episode here or there, and it reads so well as this long saga of Lavender Jack. But I wonder for you, because you can see not only the evolution of Mimly as Lavender Jack and as a character, and also Farrier, and certainly Honoria Crab. She has a wonderful arc and has grown a lot.
Yeah, my favorite character.
It shows. She was a little annoying at first, but man, she has come on to be just no nonsense and yeah, a real favorite. But it does seem like the sort of the tone. I don't want to say that you weren't on solid footing to begin with, because it's quality writing right from the start. But it seems like there's a confidence to your writing as we're moving into sort of the last third of season 2, and certainly in season 3. So what have been the challenges to keep it going for this long, especially in the format of almost a weekly with Lavender Jack?
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of, when you look back on this body of work, do you feel like you have improved your craft?
Oh, I would definitely say so. I think you're right to bring up the tone, because I feel like I now have a lot more understanding of how to maintain a tone. And how to, I feel like I now know these characters so well that their voices are now less affected. Like at the beginning, Farrier has a lot more of that Hercule Poirot, like being careful with her words and sort of slipping into French phrases. And partially I did away with that because I don't speak French and I constantly make mistakes when I try to put it in the comic, as people are willing to gently let me know. But also just like, I don't need to use a lot of Bertie Woosterisms to let you know that Mimly is like sort of an easygoing, aristocrat. Like, you can get that from the way he talks about things rather than like specific verbal cues. It's kind of like how, like the Fantastic Four. You know that Ben Grimm is a rough guy from the streets, like not because of slang he uses, but just because like he reacts to situations like a guy from the streets would. And that's sort of what I'm talking about. I now have a lot more confidence in writing characters who act out what they are, rather than having to put things in the script that dictates to you who they are.
Yeah, so it's almost like show, don't tell.
Exactly. And I've also gotten a lot better at writing scenes that don't quite feel like, okay, here's the Mimly Ducky scene, here's the Farrier Crab scene. Like, I feel like I've gotten better at writing episodes so that these things thematically feed into each other a little bit better.
Well, the other thing that I was going to ask about, because again, creator owned through WEBTOON, you're not only writing it, you're drawing it, every episode. And you have help with colors, which is, the colors are fantastic.
The tremendous Jen Manley.
Yeah, she's like, I hope as long as you do this that I wouldn't want anyone else to color it.
Me either.
I really wouldn't.
I'd sooner put it in black and white.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with that. But as much as your writing has evolved, do you feel that you've become a better visual storyteller? I mean, not necessarily a better artist, but are you faster? Does it feel like you've evolved as an artist? Do things come a little easier now, kind of blocking out scenes and whatnot?
Oh, definitely. I would say I'm a better artist than when I started. Things like I now understand so much better how to use photo reference. I was
Mm.
also only a year, maybe a little less, into drawing digitally when I started Lavender Jack. So, you know, from things like what tools and digital techniques complement my work better, I now understand, but also um, things like what reads in the Webtoon format. Like I would do a lot of crowd shots, um, but those go by in a blip,
Hmm.
like the types I would draw in early season one. Um, I was still thinking like a traditional comic book where a, a splash page is, oriented like this and it feels like a huge image. But in Webtoon, every panel is that size.
Hmm.
So to create a splash page, it's not about the image you're depicting, it's about the pan of the camera down the image as you scroll. Um, and like I understand better, you know, like how action is supposed to flow in a webtoon. How yeah, I'm having trouble landing on one specific thing because I feel like I'm better at
Got
everything.
everything.
Yeah,
Well, I would.
God knows the lettering's better.
Well, I would say it is noticeable, especially having gone through and reread everything recently, like I did. But for me personally, like the thing that I love the most, and I'm really noticing that you're doing in season three, and we've talked about this. I think the very first time we had you on, we talked about how the setting, the city of Gallery itself, and kind of the time period it's a character in and of itself.
Mm.
In season three, it seems like a lot of the episodes start with architecture, with buildings in Gallery, and it helps set that aesthetic. Like I pull up the new episode, I load it, and it's got a building or background or some architecture or whatever, and it's just immediately pulls me. It prepares me to read the Adventures of Lavender Jack because I'm in that city, and it's fantastic. So that's something that you've continued to do. Is it second nature at this point that Gallery as a character?
I mean, a lot of it, yeah. Honestly, in season two, I think I took it for granted. I think I didn't do enough
Mm.
investing in Gallery as a character. At times, season two, which I'm by and large quite happy with, and there are some fun touches that let you feel the character of Gallery, especially in the Honoria Crab episodes, like when she runs into the two kids playing Lavender Jack and the Black Note in
Oh,
little
right,
homemade
yeah,
costumes.
yeah.
There were some fun things like that. But at times, season two could fall into a narrative trap I really dislike, where it kind of feels like the whole plot is just happening sort of in between the same dozen people, and
Mm-hmm.
that considering this was the story was largely about an election and about large acts of terror, it did sometimes feel like the city wasn't as populated as I would have liked it to be.
Mm.
Um, and a lot of it was just there's just kind of I maybe booked a little too much into season two because I would have loved to spend more time on the election. I would have loved to spend more time in the orphanage, um,
Mm.
and uh, yeah. So season two was a big lesson in like how to book the next installment of a story so that it feels natural from the first installment, but also that it has enough breathing room that you can play around in it, especially the new elements.
Yeah, I sort of I now I didn't know that I mean I think I had read a Q&A you did where you talked a little bit about wanting that you wish you could have fit more election stuff in there, but I didn't realize that was purposeful, that there wasn't quite as much breathing room because there is a claustrophobia to season two, but it fits very well with the menace of the Black Note. So for me
Yeah.
it worked. You know what I
Well, at a
mean?
certain point, I started kind of steering into the skid. Like
Okay.
I realized we weren't going to be able to get like in the nitty gritty, like the wire style political stuff that I
Hmm.
had wanted to get into at the beginning. But a lot of the real estate we sacrificed was for things like um, building up the relationship between Mimly and Johnny Summer,
Hmm.
and giving a little like devoting whole episodes to Teresa Ferrier in Switzerland. Like there were a lot of stuff that I think is very like I think that we got a lot of good fun and games out of the season, even if we didn't get into the stuff that frankly is probably more important to me than it would have
Right.
been to the readers, which is another thing I'm better at knowing now.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you. Having those first two seasons under your belt, do you feel like was the reaction from the readers, just as positive for season two as it was for season one? Did it because there is that difference in feel between the two seasons, and the characters even themselves sense it. They talk a lot in season
Mhm.
two about they're on the defensive, which they're not used to, as opposed to being on the offense like they are in season one. So was there a difference in reaction from readers for season one and season two?
I definitely felt like the readers, season two is darker than season one.
Mm-hmm.
It is like one of my touchstones for it was Zodiac, uh, um, David Fincher's Zodiac, where the hunt and the atmosphere really kind of drags, it seeps into everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the Black Note is a character. I've talked about, like, since I finished season two, I've started therapy, and I ended up talking about the Black Note in therapy because he is this sort of, like, I put a lot of my, like, darker feel. I don't want to blow up any buildings, but I put a lot of
Right.
my, like, I don't know.
Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, the Black Note is a terrorist who pretends to be, uh, spoilers for season two. He just pretends to be a good guy. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something so after I wrote it and read it back, I'm like, oh, this is revealing. I should talk about this. So in terms of the audience reaction, they definitely knew they were in something a little bit more serious than season one. But on the other side, the mystery of the Black Note, I think they found pretty compelling. And because we did start out the season knowing who he was going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and all the clues are there. And it was really rewarding to see people try and figure it out, try and second guess each other. And then what's great is that some people totally nailed it. They picked up all the clues. They correctly identified who he was. Um, and I was delighted. I mean, the same thing has happened a bit in season three. There are like smaller mysteries that people can solve. And when they do solve them, I mean, that makes me feel like a good writer. That I can't imagine being somebody who would change the plot because somebody guessed it.
Right. Yeah, I thought
And,
that was a big payoff in season two. Finding I did not have any idea who it was originally, and then obviously on the reread I knew, and I was able to see some of those clues like you're talking about. Um, for season three, obviously, we don't want to spoil too much because maybe people haven't had a chance to check it out, but there's a second Lavender Jack, and that was a nice mystery. And that one, I kind of maybe about halfway through the first act, I started having my suspicions, but
mhm.
we still don't know exactly how it all works with who it is. So I'm looking forward to that reveal as well.
Well, I love a guy in a mask, like, as a narrative element.
Mm-hmm.
Who or what is under there? Let's find out. It's something. Um, I'm a big fan of Grant Morrison's run on Batman, and it's something he would regularly do really effectively. Introduce somebody, you don't know who it is. It's going to be somebody. There are clues. Tune in next week. See if you got it right. Um,
Yeah, well, it helps to add to that feeling of feeling compelled. I want the answers, so you keep coming back.
yeah.
In addition to the great art and the wonderful. I mean, I feel like part of the reason I love Lavender Jack so much is I just love the syntax and hearing Mimly, whether he's Mimly or he's Lavender Jack, whichever persona he's in, just his vocabulary, the way he talks. I mean, I love it.
That's the hope, is that it's a comic that panel to panel, it is very, like, if you like the flavor of Lavender Jack, and not everybody does. Like, if somebody doesn't dig Lavender Jack, I don't think that's them being wrong, because it's kind of
Mm.
a specific thing. It requires you to know certain references. But if you do like the flavor, I try to make sure that every couple panels or so you're getting a nice bite of it.
Right. Yeah, it's a good flow. Well, we talked about how you feel like you've grown as a writer, you've evolved as a writer and as an artist. Are there any challenges? Are there any things now that you're on season three that weren't as hard when you were starting out that now you're like, oh man, I didn't realize that 3 years or 3 seasons in that this would be a thing or still a thing?
Well, thirds in a trilogy are always tough because you got to answer everything. You're that's why the second installments of things tend to be good, because you're playing with house money then.
Mm-hmm.
But in the third season, things got to connect. You got to make sure that characters are given good send-offs, and it's also emotionally taxing. It's tough. Like, we've already seen the last of certain characters in season 3. And this is the last season. I hope, I feel like we're going to get to do more Lavender Jack related stuff in the future,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing's certain right now. And so, you never know what's going to happen. There's a chance that this is it. And, that there are characters that I'm like potentially never going to see again. That's, obviously I've worked on projects that have ended. And there's a certain amount of bittersweetness there, but not characters I've lived with for 3 years, 4
Right.
years. When I first pitched Lavender Jack way back in, like, I was still working on the spirit when I first pitched it. The person I was dating, person I was living with when I pitched it, got married last weekend.
Oh, wow.
It's like, that's how long it's been. Like, our relationship ran its course, and they met somebody else, and like they got their law degree there, and
Right.
like that this like entire reboot of this person's life happened over the course of Lavender Jack. So it really is, and we're incredibly cool, by the way. I'm very happy for this person. But it so many things were different when I started it. Mm-hmm. So it does feel like, well, like I say, it's very emotional. And I think way more emotional than I was prepared for.
Any kind of pressure? I mean, I know how you creative types are. You're your own worst critic. So are you putting any pressure? Do you feel any pressure yet to make sure you nail the ending? I mean, it's been so successful. It's got a dedicated following. I hope it's not keeping you up at night, but do you feel any pressure to make sure you nail it?
It is literally keeping me up at night. I do feel pressure. I feel a lot of pressure from myself, because it's important to me to nail this. But also, I get lovely messages from people about what the comic means to them. Just the other day, I saw this meme going around of, it was like the meme was that it was a bingo card for your favorite characters, and that people who look at the bingo card would see if they like the same row of characters. Mm-hmm. I also like, Scooby-Doo, Darth Vader, the artist Shaggy, and Velma. Yes, very limited scope of characters I just picked, but I like those. I got bingo. And on this one card, it was Johnny Summer from Lavender Jack. Mm. And there was a big positive reaction to Johnny Summer as a trans man. First of all, you almost never see trans men in media, especially you don't see them in positions of power, mm-hmm. Positions of heroism. And so I get messages of these characters really mattering to people, which is incredibly flattering, incredibly rewarding. And I want to make sure there's a complete circuit of those characters are brought to a satisfying, where, like, you see the last image of them and you think that makes sense. That's good. That lets me know where they're going to be at going forward, and it doesn't have to be this hangnail on my imagination.
Like, I did right by them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that, and that's interesting. I'm glad you brought up Johnny, because I want to talk a little bit about how he was received, because the last time you were on, I don't think he had been introduced yet. And it was something that you talked about wanting to do. You have this diverse character coming up, and I think you were a little nervous about the way that he was going to be received.
I was a bit, because the narrative language of Lavender Jack is very euphemistic. It's very, like, people tend not to say exactly what they mean. Mm-hmm. which is why Honoria Crabbe is such a useful character, because she always says what she means. But she's one of the few people in the comic that do that. So, and it's also not like a sexually explicit comic. So how do you depict that you have a trans character in a definitive way in that narrative language? Because I wanted people to know he was trans. I thought, there just weren't any trans characters in season 1, and I wanted there to be at least one prominent one in season 2. And some people read Teresa Ferrier as a trans woman, and I have no problem with that read. It's not personally how I see her and write her. But Johnny was always trans, and I wanted him to come across that way. And so what it came down to is, I have trans male friends, trans masculine friends, and straight up trans men in my social circle. And so I just tried to listen to how they described their own experiences and find ways for that to like seep through the edges of Johnny's character, so that if you knew trans guys, you would pick up on that.
Right.
And of course that develops, Johnny makes explicit reference to like people having female expectations of him later on in the season. And in season 3, we see his chest scars. But I had to take a long walk to get to a point where it was appropriate to see his chest.
Right.
Because the worst thing you could do would be to tokenize him, to
Exactly.
make a big show of it. So it was that high wire act that I was worried about. And I was definitely a little bit like, people in season 1 didn't get that Mimly was gay, some of them. And I got I got an angry message. I was like, well, it wasn't really angry. No, it was. I got an angry message from somebody being like, why did you make him gay? And I'm like, I don't know how you saw Lavender Jack.
Yeah.
First of all, look at the superhero persona he created for himself. And I don't know how you heard him say 3 lines and not get that he's gay. Within 10 episodes of meeting him, he like makes like bedroom eyes at a male shop attendant. Anyway, but it let me know that there's always going to be somebody who doesn't get it and will feel weird about something that expected them to have already got it.
Right. Yeah.
But you can't.
Yeah, and
you can't slow down for that.
Yeah. You can't handhold everybody, but that does remind me that I got to tell you, my favorite scene in season 3 has to do with that. Because of the way that Mimly and Ducky's relationship changes, and then they try something out in the bedroom to see.
Oh man,
that was fantastic. That had me cracking up.
Well, that's the thing of it is, so this isn't like a big plot point, so I feel comfortable talking about this, even if people haven't read the comic yet. The main, like one of the main duos in the comic is, Sir Mimly Bastrop, who is the guy in the Lavender Jack suit, and Ducky, who poses as his housemaid, but who's sort of the brains of the operation. She gathers intelligence. She kind of makes their plans. She's the other half of Lavender Jack, and they kind of have this uncertain atmosphere for the first 2 seasons, where it's not romantic, but it's not totally not. And when Mimly becomes interested in Johnny, there's like a sort of a charge in the air around it. And they end up at the end of season 2, making like a pretty clear declaration of, we're going to figure out what this thing is between us. And this is where a comment really helped me, because like I say, I knew there was this charge between them, and I knew they were going to get married. I knew I wanted to come back to season 3 with them married. But I was trying to figure out the particulars, and I saw a comment, the very last episode of season 2, where somebody said, I like Mimly and Ducky as a couple, but I have a hard time picturing them holding hands.
Right.
And I'm like, That's it. That's exactly it. It is a it is a powerful relationship, but they do not have sexual compatibility. So I wanted the moment I wanted a moment where I showed that explicitly, that where I showed that Mimly and Ducky, they tried having sex, and it's not something that worked out, and it's not something they're going to do going forward. There's no mystery here. We are completely like terminating that possibility. And so you could do that in a way that's like sad, or you could do it in a way that's funny. And it's funny. It needs to be funny.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm happy. Um, well, once again, I take a 5-minute walk back around to your question, but I'm happy that worked for you, and I'm so happy it worked for everyone else. It worked for my parents. My parents thought it was funny.
Well, there you go. If mom
Yeah.
approves. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's one of the best things about the series as well is this partnership. Like, there is so much love between Mimly and Ducky. Like, they are partners and equals in every sense of the word. And there is love there, but I mean, it just goes to show that the diversity and how there can be different types of love. You know, that they may even to some extent have some romantic love, but it doesn't extend to that physical, sexual kind of connection.
Yeah.
It doesn't make their connection any less powerful or any less relevant.
I remember I'm working on a new project right now, and I was talking to my co-writer about it, and we were talking about there's a like a lifelong like nemesis relationship between two characters in it, and we were discussing like, is there a romantic element to this feud? Because it's definitely emotionally heightened. It's very, and what my co-writer came up with was that hate is like so sexual that if actual sex was introduced into it, it would become less sexual. Like, and in a way, like I feel something similar with Mimly and Ducky. Like it's not like it's greater than romantic love or anything. It's just like their thing is very specific,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very beautiful. I love writing them because they're, you know, the first act of season 3 is called The Last of the Bastrips, which is how Mimly has referred to himself previously, which is something we borrow from the Jeeves and Wooster stories. But now Ducky is Mrs. Bastrop, and The Last of the Bastrips refers to the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's you know, as much as I love all the characters, I think writing the last lines between them is going to be the hardest part.
Yeah, and I'm sure the expectations from the readers will be high as well. And the other thing, and this is the part that's challenging, because, you know, we talk about the weekly schedule of WEBTOON, and you're writing and drawing this, and you know, how much is too much? Because you've talked in the past, you've had a lot of readers ask about putting out some Madame Ferrier stories.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got, maybe we could do some Johnny Summer stories. Maybe we could even see the adventures of Ducky and Mimly between seasons 2 and 3. There's so much potential there, but we do know that this is the last season. Doesn't mean you can't do other Lavender Jack and Jason stuff in the future, like you said. But there's only so many hours in the day, and sometimes you need to feel like, I need to take a break from this world creatively and go do something else. Is that kind of where you are with this new project?
It is. I mean, I'd even talked to WEBTOON about the Teresa Ferrier series. I had material prepared for it, and in that same meeting, I said, "Oh, by the way, there's this other project that I'm thinking of doing," and they were kind of equally enthusiastic about both. And I realized, because I've been having a hard time this season. I've had some trouble with my health, and then just the emotional component of it, and I just realized I do need a break from this world. I need to. And this new thing I'm working on, it's a comedy. It's contemporary. It takes place in the modern day. It has a main character who's very much not a well put together master detective, and it's kind of a comic about like making your peace with you know, your failures compared to those who have come before you. And that's just a mode I feel a lot more comfortable slipping into than because I mean also the Teresa Ferrier series takes place in like 1872 during a super grim period of French history. It's just like I was looking at the proposal for it the other day, and I'm like, this would be such a good comic. I hope I get to make this in the future, but if I make it next year, I think it might kill me.
Right. Well, that's another thing that I wanted to bring up. You know, you talked about how long you've lived with these characters, and you know, it's been so rewarding, you know, to be nominated for an Eisner and whatnot, and to hear the reader's response. But let's take this series in context of how our world has changed, right? The politics of the real world, you know, because, you know, right at the start, the elevator pitch, you're talking about the level of corruption in gallery. And I sort of feel like, in a way, what was happening in the real world with politics, and certainly the United States, did you sort of have to even raise the stakes of what you thought was believable? Or, you know, how can I be over the top with these politicians in gallery? Because all of a sudden what I was planning on writing isn't so far-fetched.
I mean, yeah. I remember there was an episode in season 2 where the Black Note kind of brainwashes this random guy into becoming an assassin to kill Chief Justice Gall, and he fails. Ducky intercedes in like her only action beat in the series that far, but like the day after, like the day after I started working on it, there was a mass shooting event, and that visually echoed what I had this guy, because this was a lonely white guy who was being like programmed by essentially the internet, like a very analogous to how people get brainwashed by, you know, black pill communities and whatnot. And I ended up writing a message at the end of the episode, kind of in the Lavender Jack narrative voice, just trying to put it in context for people. Like, you know, this is a story. I know it's close to what happens in the real world. Like, let's be good to each other and try and, like, I don't know, let's not let this drag us down. Let's let the way this echoes the real world give us an opportunity to try to understand it better. And, you know, similarly, there was a Noria Crab episode that went out on Fast Pass the week before the Black Lives Matter protests really started kicking off. And, you know, it was a really cop-heavy episode where there's some talk about being a police officer that could kind of go either way. And I ended up adding a new scene to it before it went out for free, just to help put it in a context I felt more comfortable with. So yeah, being, you know, I think there's a possibility that season 3 would have included like a Spanish flu storyline, but then COVID happened. So like the last thing I want to do is drop people in masks in gallery. So yeah, the world, the whole reason the Lavender Jack concept is appealing to people, I think, is because there is inequity in the world, and we would like a dandy Avenger to rectify it a little bit. But a lot of times in the comic, he can't. So it's, I don't know, this aspirational fantasy is definitely inflected by stuff happening in the real world.
Yeah, we could definitely use a Lavender Jack in the real world, but you're right, it might not even work, you know, because he fails plenty in the comic. But you know, it's hard to do, I think, a book like this, like you said, this aspirational type of fantasy, where the story of Lavender Jack and his motivations are so intertwined with, you know, the politics between the haves and the have-nots. So you probably never could have guessed it would have turned out to be so relevant in the time that we're living in when you started. But I think that's part of the reason it's so great, and that it'll stand the test of time.
I hope so. I mean, I think I said this on the show before, but when I was just getting ready to start it, I was having a conversation with my friend Paul Guinan, who does wonderful historical work in comics and in general media. And I was describing the concept to him, and what he pointed out was that the 1910s were sort of the last era of noblesse oblige, because after the Great Depression, there's this idea that if you had money, it's because you earned it or you were smart and you didn't owe anybody anything. But prior to that, and this is a somewhat simplified view of history, but prior to that, there was this idea that if you inherited money, if you inherited royalty status, you were like the debt you paid to that was that you helped those less fortunate. And if that's not with great power comes great responsibility, I don't know what is. And so my hope is that the lesson people take from Lavender Jack isn't we need a vigilante to make rich people pay. I hope that the lesson they take from that is we all have skills we have attributes, we have inheritances, be it wealth, athletic ability, intelligence, or like an Oreo crab, just being like the biggest Hufflepuff in the world. We all have things that we can use to help those less fortunate than us. We all have our own version of noblesse oblige.
Well, the other thing that's great about it is certainly when I started reading it, and the title is Lavender Jack. It's not, the Lavender League, which was mentioned a few times. And so I was thinking, okay, this is going to be the story of this lone vigilante, fighting against injustice. And it's clear very early on with his partnership with Ducky, like we've talked about, but then with Madame Ferrier and Crab and Johnny, and they start adding to their numbers that it really is a Lavender League. And I think that speaks to the way out of this mess, whether it's the Lavender Jack a fictional mess or the mess we're in, is we got to work together. Yes, we all need to use our gifts, but we also need to pull together. And I think that's a powerful message as well.
Well, no character in Lavender Jack ever achieves anything meaningful on their own. When people go off half-cocked, that's when they get, physically defeated. That's when they run into dead ends. Because I love pulp fiction. I love Doc Savage and Tarzan and The Shadow. I like these. I like a lot of stuff that over the years, over the 20th century, became really synonymous with toxic masculinity. And the way around that is to do narratives, like Fury Road, like Mad Max Fury Road, where you can have these cool, like rugged, sort of individualistic characters, but that alone can't solve problems. Like they need to find their place in a larger, tapestry of skills, abilities, and motivations. And that's what I hope I do with Lavender Jack is we do need to pull together, because they will always beat us alone. And there's a lot of factors out there that try to divide us, and they just don't have to. We don't have to play their game.
Yeah, well, the other thing that's cool about it is because you do that and everybody gets a chance to shine in the narrative. I don't necessarily have a favorite character, and like I just love that. I love them all. Love Ducky, love Johnny, love Mimly. Like they all get their chance to shine. They all get, they all bring something unique to the team, and that's fantastic.
I mean, honestly, I feel like I could write like a mini series about any Lavender Jack character. Like even in season 3, we have this journalist Abacus Ma who goes missing, and his brother Barnabas Ma, this construction worker, hires Ferrier and Crab to find him. And in my head, Abacus Ma was like a kid detective, and his big brother was, that was his Ben Grimm, like looking out for him.
The heavy.
And I could write like Abacus Ma, Kid Genius next week. I could write this Better Call Saul style prequels about the Hawthorns taking over Gallery, and you better believe I would take a pay cut to do the like Mimly and Ducky's 2 Years Abroad series.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And we still have the character of Nina as well.
Yes.
Nightjar, that's still a bit of a mystery as of now.
Boy,
So
I'm
looking forward to
writing
learning more about that.
the us learning more about her is in the episodes I'm putting out right now, and it's well, we'll see what people think, but it's kind of it's producing those has been pretty tough, but I think it's going to be worth it.
So we should talk a little bit about inspiration specifically for season 3 as well, because we've been a little spoilery with 1 and 2, but season 3 there's still a lot of mystery out there. Some things we've got answers for. Who was the imposter or the second Lavender Jack, but things like Nina we don't know yet. Can you talk a little bit about some of your inspiration specifically for the story that you're doing in season 3?
Yes, I mean, one of the season's called Life During Wartime, which of course is a great Talking Heads song, and it's got a great beat. You can dance to it. It's in an international conflict, and it's got this really fast beat to it. And it's sort of popping between a year, and it's kind of frantic. Like the big refrain is "This ain't no party, this ain't no disco, this ain't no fooling around."
Mm-hmm.
But also, the song is about a pair of spies, and the dialogue of the song is what they're saying to each other. The last real audible line of the song, at least in the radio edit, as it starts to taper off and get quiet, is "You look exhausted. I'll do some driving. You ought to get you some sleep." And so that was I've listened to that song hundreds of times producing this season, because that's the vibe. It's things are frantic. We're short on time, but we're together, and we're gonna we're keeping our heads above water here, and so that's why it's called Life During Wartime, because not only is that the song, but also there's something just so Lavender Jack about it. There's this World War I is happening. There's this horrible conflict. Thousands of people die every day. But we will remain gallant. We'll persevere. We'll stay true to ourselves. And maybe if we all pull together, we can do something that improves this situation, which is why there's an exclamation point on it. Life During Wartime. Narratively, I honestly have a hard time pinning any one thing down, because I feel like this just came so organically from the first 2 seasons. It seems like the natural progression of what would happen. I mean, obviously, you could see shades of things like, the Thin Man with Mimly and Ducky's new relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Nick and Nora Charles. But honestly, this is probably my most undirect referenced season so far. Everything has just been the sum of the first 2 parts. Because season 2 was absolutely the Phantom of the Opera. It was the Dark Knight, and it was it was The Wire. It was supposed to be like this dark sociological story, and season 1 had its own influences, but season 3 is our most vibe propelled season yet. I will say that there is this is also the season that's most inspired by the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, one of my favorite comics by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill. And it also has an arc that is directly inspired by the Guns of Navarone, which is one of my favorite movies from the 1960s. But I'm sure that if you asked me a month after I finish it, I would be like, oh yeah, no, that was the French Dispatch. That was the Third Man. That I'm sure I could pop stuff off, but I think I might be too in the woods to see the forest right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because what I had wondered was, there are so many hints in going all the way back to season 1, certainly in season 2, that this is coming, and then based on the time period it's set in, we know that they're they're talking about World War I that's about to happen because, we're looking back on it. So for me, I just was wondering if there's like subconsciously, you don't necessarily need to draw on inspiration from any sort of fictional stories, having, gone to school and learned the history of World War I. You know what I mean? Like, is there some inspiration that just comes from the time period and knowing, the horrors that happened, but not necessarily wanting to be fully cognizant of that as you're working on it?
Well, I did do a lot of research into World War One before I started this season. I actually consulted with Paul Guinan, who gave me the noblesse oblige tip, because his World War One knowledge is extensive, and he told me things like how sometimes to defeat tanks, men would just swarm over tanks like ants with grenades they'd lob in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sequence early on in the season where Mimly's running over a downed like tank mech, which was inspired by that. I watched that documentary, They Will Not Grow Old, a couple of times, which is a Peter Jackson produced documentary that through digital augmentation, they colorize and motion modify footage from World War I in a way that makes it look like it's happening right now. And that really blew my hair back. Like, just how there's a sequence in particular where officers are making tea out of the coolant water that gets heated when you fire a Gatling gun. And there's something like that happens.
Right.
And so this is a season about war, with the idea being that war is kind of the ultimate organized crime, where people are compelled into just horrible acts for honor, for money. Like it's this massive corrupting power. And in order to kind of get some skin in the game, I wanted to spend the first act with Mimly and Ducky in the mud in the war.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted them to have to look at these soldiers. I wanted to make sure that we weren't using World War I as like a D&D mat. Like
right.
I wanted to, and it's not even literally World War I. It's like it's got fictional countries in it, and
Mm-hmm.
the dates are wrong for it to start, but all of those details are there to pay respect to the real war, and hope that our commentary on war in general can have just some meager bona fides, so that we're not just, I'm not just a 31-year-old white dude opining about like how we shouldn't use mustard gas.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and it's, you're not romanticizing it, but you're not exploiting the horror of it to add to the kind of emotional impact of the story either. Yeah. You're just presenting it as, this is what it is, and really that's all you have to do, because we all know how, the atrocities, the stories of people
so true,
rotting off their legs and whatnot.
I mean, it gets grisly. I mean, there's a reason that an early scene in season 3 is set in a version of the tin, I think it's called the Tin Nose Shop, this place that would make, fabrication masks for people who had been disfigured. But then at the same time, it was also important to me to acknowledge that there is such personal heroism that happens. It's not just suffering. It's not just like, just because you are being used and taken advantage of doesn't mean that the heroism you show isn't real.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's why we have heroic, not just heroic soldiers, but also heroic members of the military police in gallery. Like this thing that's become kind of a corrupt occupying power, there are still people doing good jobs. We never want to run to a situation where we are putting people in a uniform that means it's okay to beat them up. We have to strive to make sure everybody remains personalized, which is why, at one point when we do just want to beat up a bunch of people up, I explicitly, using the word explicitly a lot, I purposefully set it up to be this military base where they send the bad soldiers,
Right. Yeah.
or they I mean that's like their big Suicide Squad base. So okay, if you're here, we can hit you.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, but I mean, speaking to your other point, yeah, I love that scene where Lavender Jack is stealing the war bonds, and we realize that, yeah, maybe this woman is, and Lavender Jack even says, "You're working for somebody corrupt. I can tell you're better than this." You know,
Mm-hmm.
that was a fantastic scene. Added a lot of context. So yeah.
We always got to keep track of the idea that Lavender Jack he's a gentleman villain. He
Mm-hmm.
is. There always has to be that style to it. Um, if there's no style, if there's no panache and honor, then he's just like fancy Batman. And there needs to be this strange kind of neighborliness to him, because at other times he needs to express real, like, venomous invective. He needs to really be able to express his hate to somebody. And that doesn't mean anything if he's not nice most of the time.
Right. You need that contrast. Now, I know fans of Lavender Jack have asked this before, but I'm sort of obligated because I know people that are listening will want to know this. Print version of Lavender Jack, will we ever? And I have a nice volume for my bookshelf.
It's been a process. I will say I am currently talking with a certain party about producing Lavender Jack in a print form that I think will surprise people, but is theoretically extremely exciting. We'll see. It's the end of the year, so I might have to wait a while to find out whether or not they'll move on this. But I'm excited. They're excited. They reached out to me to do this, and believe me, as much as the readers want this to work out, I want it to work out possibly even a little bit more, because if this works out, it's going to be like the best possible way you could get Lavender Jack in print.
Yeah, because again, and I want it for my shelf, and I'm a fan, obviously, but the other thing, and I'm sure as the creator, these are your children. I don't want it done if it's not done correctly, and this is built for WEBTOON with the vertical scroll, so it's got to be done the right way, because the story and the characters and the thing you built deserves that. It doesn't deserve to just be cut into 8.5 by 11 equivalent panels and printed. You know what I mean? Like that.
Right.
That wouldn't do service to what you've created.
I've over the last year or so, I've talked with a couple different parties about maybe doing a collection, and one of them had said that we've got a good staff here. If you just give us the files, we'll orient it for you. And I'm like, you are not capable of doing that. Yeah, you won't know how. You don't know how to. You like if there are a lot of comics that are very, very good, but are just modular. They're panels. It's not hard to kind of grok how that would work in a comic. But I'm just doing more complicated stuff than that. So it has to be me doing it, and it has to be, I got to find somebody who is willing to foot the bill for me to do that for a couple months. And we're talking a not insubstantial amount of work. But
yeah, exactly. And like we were saying before, there's not enough hours in the day to tell all the stories you want to tell. So to go back and do this in a different format. So that's my whole point, is if you're going to do it and invest the time, it's got to be done right.
Yeah. And I do know it can be done. And I really want to be able to give those first episodes the kind of the polish they deserve. Because I sometimes fall into thinking that they're not very good. But then I go back and read them, especially in season 3. You go back and read the season 1 stuff a lot to make sure things are rhyming properly. And it's like a pretty exciting first couple episodes. It just, you redraw some faces that aren't quite right. You improve the lettering, and it's there. So I look forward to the opportunity to create something that you can put on your shelf that is as good as you wish it, as good as you would hope it to be.
Well, here's hoping one day that it happens. I'll definitely be buying a copy and supporting that. So
Much appreciated.
I know all you Lavender Jack fans out there will do so as well. So it's been great catching up with you, Dan. Probably have to have you. We can't go this long. I think it's been almost 2 years since you've been on.
Oh goodness,
18 months because it was definitely before the pandemic. So yeah, 2019, almost 2 years. We cannot go that long without having you on again.
I completely agree.
Back on and talk about the conclusion of Lavender Jack and maybe when the announcement of this next series, we can talk about the end of Lavender Jack and talk about your new thing when the time is right.
That would be great. I would love that.
So to you listeners, go check out Lavender Jack. It's on WEBTOON. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can go check it out. You can read it on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, your laptop, what have you. I definitely recommend it. Also, go back and listen to the other times Dan's been on the show. He's been on twice before, like I said, and we've talked about Lavender Jack extensively, and focusing on season 1. The first time we had him on, season 1 was about a third of the way done, and then the second time season 2 had just started, so we talked a lot about season 1, the conclusion of that, and those were great episodes. And again, Dan, best of luck in the future. Don't be too hard on yourself with the pressure to nail this. I have faith in you. Having gone back and reread all the episodes up to date, you got it, man. You know these characters. You will nail the ending.
That means the world to me. Thank you.
So as we're closing up here, one last thing. Social media, if anybody wants to follow along with your work or engage at all, where's the best place to find you online?
I'm most active on Twitter. It's just at Dan Schkade, my first and last name. I'm also on Instagram, again, at Dan Schkade. Is it at on Instagram? Yeah. You can tell how relatively not as experienced in Instagram I am. Yeah. But yeah, that's where I post a lot of art. And then Twitter is where I talk about Lavender Jack. I give some behind the scenes stuff, and I post a lot of nonsense.
Well, no,
but it's high quality nonsense.
You talk a lot about, and I love this about you. Talk a lot about other comics and other creative endeavors that you're enjoying. You signal boosting other creators, which I always love. So yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. I try and curate it for people.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll put links to Dan's Instagram and Twitter in the show notes, as well as the link to the WEBTOON, everybody. So please go and check it out. It's really, really, really worth your time. I can't stress that enough. So again, Dan, thanks for taking the time. It's great to chat with you, man.
Likewise. Thanks again.
Yep. And to you listeners, thanks for joining us as always, and we'll talk to you next time.